From Quito, Ecuador, I'm Soini Gray, and this is From the South. The Brazilian Workers' Party has declared former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva will be its candidate for the October presidential election. This comes on the day after 3 judges upheld his conviction for corruption. The announcement was made in Sao Paulo during the meeting with the members of the party. Among them were former President Dilma Rousseff and the party leader, Senator Gilisi Hoffmann. Protests against Lula's conviction went into the night in Sao Paulo, Porto Alegre, and many other cities across Brazil. The judges also increased his sentence from 9.5 years to 12 years in prison. The protesters insist that there's no concrete evidence of corruption against Lula and that the court's decision was a political one to prevent him from running in October. Lula himself has said that it was the Brazilian people who had been on trial.
I am extremely calm and aware of what is going on in Brazil, and I am absolutely sure I have not committed any crime. I can tell you that those who have judged me will have less peace of mind than me.
João Pedro Stedele of the Landless Workers Movement promised that the fight for Lula will go on.
Lula will be a candidate despite the result in Porto Alegre. We need to mobilize, to campaign from August to October, and our campaign will be rooted in the politics and ideology of the working class. We can say certainly that we are going to make Lula a candidate and we are going to win the election. We are going to talk about a different future for Brazil. It will be a popular government. It will make structural changes as long as the masses participate in the electoral campaign and continue to mobilize.
The court's decision on Wednesday came after a hearing in Porto Alegre that lasted almost 7 hours. Outside, thousands protested, and our correspondent was there.
From the early hours of Wednesday, January 24th, thousands of people were already rallying a few meters from Porto Alegre's federal court to put pressure on the judges to reject Lula's corruption conviction. Like many legal experts, they believe there is no evidence against him.
Lula represents leadership not only for Brazil, but for all Latin America. If he can run for president, our democracy will be demolished.
For social movements, the judge's ruling against Lula was not a surprise.
This decision was already expected, considering that our judiciary has sold to international interests. And this process is part of a coup. So the Brazilian Popular Front will keep fighting in order to win our democracy.
For the thousands of people here in Porto Alegre and those who mobilized in 24 states across the country, today's decision won't stop them from continuing to fight against the destruction of democracy.
Defending democracy in Brazil is defending the right of Lula to be a candidate for the presidency, because he is our leader and there is no evidence against him. Today is a great day for our people, because the fight is only beginning.
This Wednesday decision still doesn't remove Lula from the presidential race. In the next few days, his defense team will appeal to have the court's decision annulled, while Lula's supporters say they will step up the mobilizations and protest. They say an election without Lula is a fraud.
We spoke to sociologist Sabrina Fernandez in Brazil, who told us of the impact this political storm is already having on the country.
Right now we saw today the market soaring because of Lula's conviction. So we know there's a problem related to how the ruling class is connected to these judiciary proceedings and Lula's conviction right now. So there's a message that there's a problem with the judiciary. There's a problem with how politics have been conducted since Dilma Rousseff's impeachment and right before that. And in a way, that's a reaction to how people were moving in June 2013, demanding fairer processes, demanding proper laws and proceedings against corruption in the country. And there's this problem of polarization. And I would urge everyone else to keep an eye on what's going on in Brazil this year, because not everything you see and not everything you hear is going to be dealt with the honesty that's necessary to make sure that all the proceedings this year are fair.
The Venezuelan government says it is expelling the Spanish ambassador in Caracas. The foreign minister, Jorge Arreaza, posted the official announcement on his Twitter, saying the Bolivarian government has decided to declare persona non grata the ambassador of the Spanish kingdom because of the repeated attacks and interference in our internal affairs by the Spanish government. And Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, has confirmed he will stand in the election to be held before the end of April. Maduro told a rally of transport workers that he would be a candidate for the poor, the working class, women and youth. The Venezuelan government condemned a statement by the Lima Group of Latin American countries, which criticized the call for early elections.
The Bolivarian government of Venezuela, along with the Dialogue Commission, rejects the vulgar and disrespectful comments made by the so-called Lima Group. The OAS secretary, Luis Almagro, leads this illegal right-wing opposition group against the sovereignty of Venezuela. We repudiated the interventionist statements that intend to violate international law. This group tries to prevent at all costs the elections for April 20th of 2018. The Venezuelan government will not attend to foreign threats of any kind, and the more sanctions are made against our nation, the more elections will be held. Is there something more democratic than an election process? The formula that President Maduro found to face the violence of the opposition coalition in the months of April was to build a peaceful electoral process.
The Bolivarian government will take measures in defense of its sovereignty after the EU imposed new sanctions, according to the Venezuelan Foreign Minister, Jorge Arreaza.
We invite all the diplomatic members of the European Union to present a formal protest representing the Bolivarian government of President Nicolas Maduro after these unusual and inconvenient aggressions which go against the public international law. After the sanctions of the North American Empire and the EU, the people of Venezuela will respond with democracy and presidential elections.
Social movements in Ecuador are on the last leg of their campaign for the referendum on February 4th. The former president, Rafael Correa, is campaigning for a no vote, but has many hurdles to overcome. Our correspondent in Quito has more.
President Lenín Moreno has campaigned for the referendum to be held on February the 4th. His government called for elections through a presidential decree.
Today we feel the wind of freedom, of hope, of tolerance and respect, but most of all the wind of democracy.
But the opponents to the referendum, led by former President Rafael Correa, have called the electoral process unfair and a threat to the no campaign.
It is a very short electoral campaign, only 20 days. For 5 days, they didn't allow our electoral advertisements to reach people. This is very serious. We have complained.
There are 4 social organizations registered to the campaign against the referendum and 36 that are supporting President Lenín Moreno.
They are using deceptive mechanisms. They are deceiving people. They are not allowing them to have information from both sides. They are not allowing us to campaign against the referendum.
Meanwhile, opponents of the referendum are intensifying their activities around the country, with motorcades led by Rafael Correa.
Media organizations are saying that Rafael Correa's campaign is pushing for violence, but it's others that are doing that. The media is not saying who are the ones really pushing a violent campaign.
The National Electoral Council has denied Correa's request to start a new political party.
We take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. A movement spearheaded by the National Indigenous Congress in Mexico continues to collect signatures in order to formalize their participation in the January 1st elections. Its spokeswoman, Maria de Jesus Patricio Martinez, better known as Marichui, visited Mexico City to gather support.
Playing protest music, social movements from Mexico City took part in a political and cultural event to support the tentative presidential run of the National Indigenous Congress.
This movement shares a belief that we are capable of governing ourselves, and above all, that we are capable of governing our land and our lives in general.
This is the second massive rally to collect signatures in support of the initiative launched by 400 indigenous groups, among them the Zapatista Army of National Liberation.
This is a legitimate proposal that comes from below, that doesn't make any promises. To the contrary, it's an invitation to organize and to defend our dignity in our lands.
Volunteers in support of the head of the Indigenous Council of Government, Maria de Jesus Patricia Martinez, says various political parties have failed them.
Things are only getting worse. The economy worsens. There's more violence, unemployment, there's famine and disinformation. So what good are political parties?
To take part in the elections, the Indigenous Congress and its subsidiaries must collect 860,000 signatures.
We call on you to rise up, to fight back. We must be autonomous in every way possible. We must rise up with whatever is at hand. We make this call because we can see that the war against the working class is going to be worse than ever. The war against the indigenous, against women, against children, against all of us.
Reaching their goal is a complex one. It's difficult and expensive to get the petitions to remote communities.
Even after Pope Francis warned Peru about the urgent need to protect the Amazon and to stop deforestation, the Congress has approved a law that could affect the well-being of indigenous communities and the conservation of national parks.
The Congress led by Keiko Fujimori made a complete change from the Pope's wishes and supported Law 3723, which allows the construction of highways in the Ucayali Amazon. It directly affects 2 indigenous reserves and 3 national parks.
The Peruvian political class kills all calls of action, including the request to respect nature, which is a sign of a cynical and lying class.
For Rumril, this law was advocated as a national interest, one that would help drug traffickers who have taken Pucallpa, the capital of Ucayali, as the center of operations.
All of the high basins of the Ucayali River and its affluents are full of cocaine at this time. This means these roads that Fujimorismo is proposing are landing highways for drug trafficking. These criminals are saying, "Thank you, Congressman Yoshinawa. Thank you, Congressman Gallareta."
This project was rejected in 2017 by the Ministries of Culture and Environment, the United Nations, and the Amazonian communities. They called the law genocidal. Nevertheless, the Fujimori bloc used its majority in Congress to approve it.
We are outraged because just hours after Pope Francis gave his message to the Congress, they approved the law, an attack that will trigger a protest by the indigenous Amazonian people of Peru.
The communities not only plan to protest, they will seek all legal options. They are also planning to write to the Pope, warning him about what they call immoral actions by the people who just days ago were asking for the Pope's blessings.
Chile's Congress has approved free higher education for the country. The Minister of Education, Paula Naves, says this is great news for thousands of young Chileans that want their right to education to be guaranteed and recognized. President Michelle Bachelet described the Congress's decision as historic. The bill was passed with 102 votes in favor and 2 abstentions. Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuela are very close to a final energy deal. The president of the Constituent Assembly, Delcy Rodriguez, led a delegation that met with Prime Minister Keith Rowley in Trinidad. The Venezuelan delegation included the president of PDVSA and the vice minister for the Caribbean. Both sides say they're very close to signing the final agreement. And at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Argentina's President Mauricio Macri said a possible trade deal between the South American bloc Mercosur is a natural one because Argentinians are descendants of Europeans.
If you really believe that Mercosur is also a good opportunity for the European Union, especially after Brexit. And I think that it's a natural association because South America, we are all descendants from Europe. So it should be the first important agreement before others that we are negotiating. And we are close. We are very close. I'm visiting President Macron tomorrow, and I expect that he will give me good news.
The political party of the FARC has asked the Colombian government to guarantee that it can safely take part in the political process. This comes amid a wave of political violence as the elections draw near.
At a press conference, FARC has condemned violence against one of their members, Johanna Poblador, who was assaulted and threatened by men wearing hoods in the south of Bogotá.
Nuestra compañera Lady Johanna Poblador.
Our partner, Lady Johanna Poblador, was physically and verbally attacked by two men and a woman wearing hoods, carrying machine guns and riding in a black van with no license plates.
Estaban en una camioneta.
The attacker showed Johanna pictures of other FARC members and warned her that they will also be attacked. Spokesman from the political organization said that the unknown men have been seen watching her house.
Responsabilizamos de cualquier cosa. What happens to Lady, her family, and especially her son, is the responsibility of civil authorities and the police, because they are the ones supposed to protect Colombian citizens. We all have the right to take part in politics, even if we are opposed to this regime.
The report comes during a period of political violence in the country. The FARC party says that 36 ex-FARC fighters have been killed since the signing of the peace agreement. 13 relatives of former fighters have also been killed.
All citizens must have their security guarantee, especially who put down their weapons because of the peace agreement.
FARC members stressed that the political party came about after the finalizing of the peace agreement and demanded Colombian authorities guarantee their safety so that they can take part in politics.
Our safety must be guaranteed. Our party has played its part and put down its weapons. And in exchange, the state must prevent violence against our members. That was the essence of the peace agreement.
La violencia contra nuestra fuerza política. Political violence has deep roots in Colombia. Between the 80s and 2000, more than 5,000 members of the party Izquierda Unión Patriótica were killed. Guarantees for the safety of political participants are needed to avoid this being repeated.
We take a short break now. Join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting on. Welcome back. Several European leaders took jabs at U.S. President Donald Trump's policies at the World Economic Forum in Davos. President Trump arrived in Switzerland early this morning.
World leaders are increasingly critical of Trump's America First rhetoric, which has made the U.S. increasingly difficult to forge trade negotiations with. Italian Prime Minister Paolo Gentiloni said leaders can defend their country's interests, but must respect existing international agreements.
It is totally legitimate, understandable, the desire for political leaders to defend their own citizens, their own companies, their own economy. So I respect that. But obviously there is a limit, and the limit is the framework we are all living in.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel addressed the forum saying isolationism and protectionism were not solutions to the economic challenges facing countries around the world.
We believe isolationism will get us nowhere. We believe we have to cooperate and that protectionism is not the right answer. And we believe that if we share the opinion that things are not being done fairly and the mechanisms aren't reciprocal, then we should look for multilateral solutions and not unilateral ones that ultimately only promotes isolationism and protectionism.
Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron called for a global compact to harness the negative effects of globalization. Macron went further to poke fun at President Trump without calling his name, saying the heavy snowfall might lead some people to question climate change. And while most eyes in Brazil are on that court ruling in Porto Alegre, President Michel Temer has been at the World Economic Forum in Davos to promote his reform agenda. He talked about his policies to scale back Brazil's social security and Brazil's pension system, and he's also joined other world leaders in criticizing protectionism.
My administration, in contrast, has been acting to increasingly integrate Brazil into the global economy and to position the country properly into the international scene by working together with our Mercosur partner nations. We have restored the bloc's original vocation for free market, we have identified trade barriers, and we have been working to remove them.
Trump will have his chance to respond to the critics when he arrives on Thursday.
The Seine River continues to rise, causing floods in a southeastern suburb in and around Paris. Water has seeped into homes and shops in some residential streets in the Paris suburb and has led to travel disruptions. The Seine is expected to reach 6.2 meters this week, and the authorities have warned Parisians to stay alert and away from the river. Dozens of demonstrators are protesting in Vereeniging in South Africa against an African school language policy. Pupils, teachers, and parents are protesting the Afrikaans Medium High School, which has been at the center of a controversy after a court ruled that the school can refuse admission to 55 English-speaking black students. The English-speaking students were forced to go to schools 15 kilometers away.
I am here to show my dissatisfaction against what is happening against my people. And then we have been denied. I never thought, I'm an activist, I'm a student leader, I'm a teacher by profession. I never thought 42 years later, after June the 16th, that we as a nation and as people would be still having problems with so-called Africans.
And now here are some of the other stories from around the world.
Syria's Foreign Minister Faisal Megdad has told the BBC that the country will, quote, act accordingly in response to Turkey's invasion in northern Syria. His comments comes on the 6th day of Turkey's air and ground Operation Olive Branch in the Afrin region of northern Syria. The operation has opened a new front in Syria's multi-sided civil war as President Tayyip Erdogan vowed to extend Turkey's military operation in Syria to the town of Manbij. In Davos, Zimbabwe's new president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, says that the country will go to the polls before July. This will be the first election since former President Robert Mugabe was ousted after 37 years in power. Emmerson says that the elections will be free and fair.
We said we abide by the results. We are very clear. The purpose of an election is to have the electorate select a team of a team of persons whom they think addresses their challenges and their needs. If we lose elections, that's it. Whichever party wins the election will proceed to take the reins of power.
United States diplomat Bill Richardson has resigned from an international panel set up to advise on the Rohingya crisis. Richardson claims the panel set up by Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi was whitewashed, and he accused the Nobel Peace Prize winner of lacking moral leadership. At least 4 people were killed after a commuter train derailed near to the city of Milan, Italy during rush hour. Dozens of others were injured seriously, while some 100 more sustained light injuries. Emergency services officials said the cause of the accident was not immediately clear. North Korea women's ice hockey players have arrived in South Korea to form a joint team with South Korean players. It is the first such Korean team in 3 decades. The 12 players crossed the border with an official delegation and will start training soon for the Pyeongchang 2018 Winter Olympics. Chinese scientists have announced their success in cloning 2 monkeys from somatic cells using the same technique that cloned sheep Dolly. The identical macaques were born several weeks ago at a laboratory in China. The scientists say the success means China will pioneer in disease and brain science research.
We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our Tell Us Your website, tellus.tv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I am Soini Gray. Thank you so much for watching.